Imagine a world just teetering on the brink, where the most destructive force we've ever created could just spread like everywhere. How would nations absolutely terrified of nuclear war actually manage to come together to try and stop that global nightmare? Well, today we're taking a deep dive into a really pivotal moment in history that answers pretty much that exact question. We're tackling the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. You probably know it as the NPT. And look, this isn't just some dusty old document gathering cobwebs. No, it's a foundational agreement. Still shapes global security, international relations, even the future of energy for all of us, really. Our guide for this journey. It's an official notification document from the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA. It's called INF CIRC 140, dated April 22nd, 1970. And this thing, it didn't just announce the treaty was, live. It gave us the full certified text of the NPT itself. And, keep in mind that image, that symbol of the IAEA's mission, the atom inside the laurel wreath, that really represents its crucial role here.
So our mission today is to really unpack this treaty. It's complex, it's crucial. We want to understand its core bargain, its pretty ambitious goals, and also the intricate mechanisms it's set up. Not just to avoid nuclear catastrophe, right? But also to sort of manage the peaceful uses of atomic energy carefully. By the end of this, you'll have, I think, a much deeper insight into an agreement that, over half a century later, is still absolutely central to preventing widespread nuclear conflict. Okay, let's get into it. To really grasp the NPT, we kind of have to transport ourselves back to the Cold War era. The air back then, it wasn't just tense, it crackled with the real possibility of nuclear devastation. Seriously, the question wasn't if, it felt more like when. And the treaty's preamble, it directly reflects this deep, deep anxiety. It talks plainly about, the devastation that would be visited upon all mankind by a nuclear war, and consequent need to make every effort to avert the danger of such a war and to take measures to safeguard the security of peoples. That's pretty stark language, not just legal speak.
Oh, absolutely stark. And what's really insightful there in that preamble is how it immediately targets the core issue. It says, believing that the proliferation of nuclear weapons would seriously enhance the danger of nuclear war. For anyone familiar with this stuff, the key insight isn't just that they saw the danger, it's the foresight, right? Understanding that the spread proliferation was maybe just as critical a threat as the bombs already existing, they saw a future where lots of fingers on the button would just exponentially increase the risk. And getting everyone to agree on that back then, that was huge. That was a radical shared understanding.
Right, and it wasn't like this idea just popped out of nowhere, was it? The NPT didn't just materialize. The treaty itself says it builds on previous efforts. It explicitly mentions conforming with resolutions of the United Nations General Assembly calling for an agreement on the prevention of wider dissemination of nuclear weapons.
So yeah, it's not a standalone flash of genius. It's more like the culmination of a decade, maybe more, of this often desperate global conversation. Exactly right. And you can connect that thread even further back. It's grounded in earlier sort of concrete steps, like the 1963 treaty banning nuclear weapon tests in the atmosphere, in outer space, and underwater. So the insight there is that the NPT wasn't this sudden fix. It was an evolution, a much more comprehensive attempt to build on, the limited successes they had before. It really shows this continuous, often uphill struggle to manage this incredibly dangerous technology.
And even though it was focused on stopping the spread, the NPT had this huge ultimate ambition, didn't it? The preamble talks about this really long-term goal. It declares an intention to achieve at the earliest possible date the cessation of the nuclear arms race and to nuclear disarmament, and on a treaty on general and complete disarmament under strict and effective international control. Wow. I mean, that's a massive vision, isn't it? Almost sounds, utopian considering the time.
It does, and that's absolutely key. For listeners who track these things, the insight is that the NPT wasn't just a practical, let's stop the spread now measure. It was also meant to be a kind of moral compass, setting this ultimate goal, this dual approach, stop the immediate spread, but also commit to getting rid of the weapons eventually. That was the foundational bargain, and the deal, basically. It acknowledged that, look, if non-nuclear countries were going to give up their right to build these things, the countries that had them had to promise to give them up too, eventually. It's a massive promise, and a massive ask, frankly.
Okay, so let's dive into that grand bargain, because it really is the absolute heart of the NPT, isn't it? It's this fundamental trade-off. Commitment swap between the haves, the states with nuclear weapons, and the have-nots, those without. A deal, essentially, to stop a nuclear free-for-all. So the first pillar of this bargain, all about stopping the spread. Non-proliferation. Article I really lays down the law for the nuclear weapon states, the NWS. Basically, they promise not to transfer to any recipient whatsoever nuclear weapons or other nuclear explosive devices or control over such weapons, either directly or indirectly. It sounds like a total ban on sharing.
It is, and it actually goes further than just, handing over a bomb, which is critical. The NWS also commit not in any way to assist, encourage, or induce any non-nuclear weapon state to manufacture or otherwise acquire nuclear weapons. The real insight here, I think, for an informed audience is just how thoroughly they tried to block every possible path for proliferation. From the existing nuclear powers to others, it wasn't just don't give them a bomb. It was also don't give them the plans, don't give them the special materials, don't even give them the know-how. It's a really far-reaching commitment.
And it's definitely a two-way street, right? Article 2 mirrors this. It lays out what the non-nuclear weapons states, the NNWS, have to do. They promise not to receive the transfer of nuclear weapons, not to manufacture or otherwise acquire them, and critically, not to seek or receive any assistance in making them. So if the NWS can't give, the NWS promise not to take or make, sounds simple on paper, but that's a huge surrender of potential sovereign power, isn't it?
It absolutely is. It's this symmetrical, legally binding pact designed specifically to prevent new nuclear weapon starts from emerging. And it's really important to understand who counted as an NWS right from the start. Article IX.3 gives a very, very specific definition. It says, for the purposes of this treaty, a nuclear weapon state is one which has manufactured and exploded a nuclear weapon or other nuclear explosive device prior to 1st January 1967. Now, the insight here is that this date, January 1st, 1967, essentially froze the nuclear club membership at 5 countries: the US, the Soviet Union, the UK, France, and China. This set up a fixed hierarchy, which, okay, created some stability, maybe. But for many other countries, it created what they saw as a permanent unfairness, this sort of nuclear apartheid.
Right. Okay, so that's the stop the spread side, non-proliferation. But there's that other equally critical pillar, the commitment to disarmament. This is where the existing nuclear powers say, okay, we'll work towards getting rid of our own weapons, too.
And that brings us squarely to Article 6. This is the other side of that grand bargain and, well, arguably the most debated part. It says each of the parties undertakes to pursue negotiations in good faith on effective measures relating to cessation of the nuclear arms race at an early date and to nuclear disarmament, and also on a treaty for general and complete disarmament. This is the NWS promise to eventually eliminate their own arsenals. Now, the critical insight here for anyone following the NPT saga is that, well, it sets this high ideal. It doesn't give a deadline. There's no concrete enforcement mechanism. And this lack of, let's say, visible progress on disarmament, it's been a constant source of tension and criticism, especially from the non-nuclear states who feel like, hey, that part of the bargain hasn't really been kept.
That is the core tension, isn't it? The treaty says what should happen, but the how and when of disarmament, that's been a continuous political fight. And it's exactly this challenge that leads us to the NPT's really tricky balancing act. How do you let the world benefit from nuclear tech for energy, for medicine, without that same tech being secretly used for weapons?
Right. And this is where Article 3 steps in. It introduces the verification system, the safeguards, run by the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA. Non-nuclear weapon states, they promise to accept safeguards negotiated with the International Atomic Energy Agency for the exclusive purpose of verification, basically to make sure they're following the rules, with a view to preventing diversion of nuclear energy from peaceful uses to nuclear weapons. It's like an international audit, but yeah, with incredibly high stakes.
And the scope, the reach of these safeguards, it's incredibly broad. It applies to all source or special fissionable material in all peaceful nuclear activities within the territory of such state or anywhere under its control. So that means pretty much any nuclear material, wherever it is, if it's for peaceful use, it falls into the IAEA's watchful eye. This is where that IAEA logo, the atom and the laurel wreath, really makes sense, symbolizing this vital verification job. The insight, I guess, is that the IAEA becomes the world's nuclear watchdog, trying to build confidence that, a power plant stays a power plant, not a covert bomb factory. It's a huge task.
It truly is enormous. And Article 3.2 adds another really crucial layer. It says that countries which sign the treaty promise not to provide nuclear materials or special equipment to any non-nuclear state for peaceful purposes unless That material is subject to the IAEA safeguards. This is vital. It means nuclear trade itself is tied to accepting these inspections. It creates this global choke point on potentially dangerous materials. It's actually an early example of trying to secure a supply chain internationally.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting, right?
Yeah.
The NPT clamps down on weapons, sure, but it also actively promotes peaceful nuclear energy. Article 4 provides that balance. It affirms the inalienable right of all the parties to develop research, production, and use of nuclear energy for peaceful purposes without discrimination, as long as they follow Articles 1 and 2. How tricky was that, practically, politically, to strike that balance in one treaty, given that the tech itself can, go both ways?
Oh, incredibly challenging, and frankly, it's still a constant negotiation today. The insight here is that this inalienable right, it wasn't just thrown in as a sweetener, it was a pragmatic realization. Many nations simply wouldn't have signed a treaty that denied them access to a technology with what seemed like back then immense potential benefits, especially for energy. So it was a trade-off. Give up the military path, gain facilitated access to the peaceful path, but with inspectors watching. It really speaks to the huge hopes people had for nuclear power back then.
It wasn't just a right, was it? It was also a commitment to cooperate globally. The parties promise to facilitate the fullest possible exchange of equipment, materials, and scientific and technological information for the peaceful uses of nuclear energy.
Mm-hmm.
And significantly, it specifically mentions helping develop applications, especially in the territories of non-nuclear weapon states, with due consideration for the needs of the developing areas of the world.
Yes, that clause really underlines the treaty's aim to sort of democratize access to the benefits of nuclear science. If you connect this to the bigger picture, it clearly reflects the Cold War context, offering a real, tangible incentive for developing nations to say no to weapons in exchange for help with technology. It's a powerful example of the carrot and stick approach baked right into the NPT.
Okay, now for something really fascinating, almost, whimsical looking back, a historical detail from that time, we turn to Article V. This covers something called peaceful nuclear explosions, PNEs. The treaty actually anticipates potential benefits from any peaceful applications of nuclear explosions. Can you believe that?
Yeah.
Using a nuclear blast for peaceful stuff.
It's quite a window into the scientific optimism or maybe, naivete of the era. The insight into Article V isn't just that they thought about PNEs, it's that it perfectly captures this moment of almost utopian faith in nuclear tech. Before we really understood the massive environmental and political fallout from any nuclear detonation, the idea was you could use these powerful blasts for huge engineering projects. Digging canals, maybe, extracting oil and gas. People seriously talked about using nukes to blast a new Panama Canal. Imagine.
Wow. Wild. And the terms were surprisingly generous too, it seems. These benefits were supposed to be available to non-nuclear states on a non-discriminatory basis, and the charge for the explosive devices used will be as low as possible and exclude any charge for research and development. So the tech, if it worked, wouldn't be kept just for the rich nuclear powers.
Right. And the mechanism was supposed to be worked out through a special international agreement or agreements, maybe through international body or bilateral deals. Negotiations were supposed to start as soon as possible. It really shows how forward-thinking the drafters were trying to be, even about concepts that, well, thankfully, maybe, never really took off widely. The practical problems, the environmental dangers, they quickly outweighed any theoretical benefits.
Makes sense. Now, of course, a treaty this big, dealing with something this critical, it needs ways to stay relevant, to adapt over time. The NPT isn't just set in stone. It has mechanisms built right in for review or amendments to try and ensure it lasts. It acknowledges the world doesn't stand still.
That's where Article 8 is crucial. It lays out how amendments can happen. Any country can propose one. But getting it approved requires a majority vote, and importantly, that majority must include all the nuclear weapon states plus certain key members of the IAEA Board of Governors. The insight here. This deliberately difficult amendment process was designed to protect that fundamental bargain we talked about. It makes it really hard for one group, say the NWS, to just force changes on the NWS, or vice versa. It ensures stability, yes, but it also means adapting the treaty can be slow.
And this leads to another really interesting feature, the built-in review process. The treaty mandated that 5 years after the entry into force, a conference of parties shall be held in Geneva in order to review the operation of this treaty. And crucially, it set up provisions for further conferences with the same objective at 5-year intervals after that. This keeps a treaty alive, right? Subject to regular checkups, regular debate, trying to stop it from becoming just.
It's a really remarkable feature, actually. These review conferences, or RevCons, They've become these major forums
Yeah.
for assessment, for arguments, for keeping the NPT relevant, warts and all. Then there's the critical escape clause in Article X. A country does have the right to withdraw from the treaty if it decides that extraordinary events have jeopardized the supreme interests of its country. But it's not like you can just walk away overnight. It requires 3 months' notice. And you have to give your reasons to all the other members and the UN Security Council. The insight here is while withdrawal is possible, making it transparent like this is designed to carry a huge political cost. It prevents impulsive exits, basically framing any withdrawal as a really serious breach of global trust.
And crucially, the treaty didn't just assume it would last forever from the get-go. Article X also set up this major decision point for its future. It said, 25 years after the entry into force, a conference shall be convened to decide whether the treaty shall continue in force indefinitely or shall be extended for an additional fixed period or periods. The decision needed a majority vote. It was a conscious choice, giving the whole global community a say in its long-term destiny. And that conference in 1995 is what led to its indefinite extension. Another absolutely huge moment for non-proliferation. Okay, so let's bring it all back home. Back to our source document, NSCRC 140. This document, it's the official notification, the proof that all these incredibly complex plans, these high-stakes negotiations had actually become reality. It announced that the treaty entered into force on 5 March 1970. That was the day it officially started.
Yep. And that date wasn't just picked out of a hat. The treaty itself, in Article IX.3, laid out the conditions. It would enter force, quote, after its ratification by the states, the governments of which are designated depositaries of the treaty, and 40 other states signatory to this treaty. And those depository governments, named in Article IX.2, were the governments of the United Kingdom, the United States, and the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. The big three, essentially, who drove the process. They were among the first to tell the IAEA, okay, it's official.
And it's a neat historical detail, isn't it, that the treaty text itself says it was done in triplicate at the cities of London, Moscow, and Washington, the first day of July, 1968. Signing it simultaneously in those 3 major capitals really underlines its global significance right from day one. It signaled this kind of unified, even if it was an uneasy unity, commitment from the superpowers to try and manage the nuclear age. So, okay, what does this all boil down to for us today? We've walked through the NPT, this huge effort, born directly out of the shadow of nuclear war. It was designed to stop the spread of nukes, commit everyone to disarmament eventually, and at the same time allow peaceful nuclear technology, but under strict checks. It's a complex tapestry, isn't it? Woven with high hopes for peace, but also the hard realities of global power.
Absolutely. And this 1970 document, INFCRC 140, with its mix of, optimism and really carefully worded restrictions, it reveals this fundamental understanding. Global security and advanced technology are just deeply, deeply linked. It highlights this ongoing search for collective security and the massive ethical responsibilities that come with technologies this powerful. For anyone interested in these issues, the NPT's enduring relevance, I think, lies in how it has largely managed to contain proliferation, even if that disarmament promise, that pillar, remains very much a work in progress.
The NPT does lay out that vision, though. General and complete disarmament under strict and effective international control. It's right there in the text. But given all the challenges, all the shifts in global power since 1970, new nuclear states outside the treaty, new technologies, shifting alliances, what does pursuing that really ambitious ideal actually mean for us today? And maybe more importantly, how much further do we still have to go to even get close to realizing that full vision? It's a question that feels just as urgent now, maybe even more so than it did over 50 years ago. And it really shapes the whole conversation about what global security even means in the 21st century.